Victoria 3 is a complex game which sadly has a pretty lackluster tutorial. Sweden is a good nation to start as, but there's a lot more opportunity for Belgium to help a new player understand what is generally best practice for Victoria 3. It's hard to go over easily because Victoria 3 is composed of many small parts, but in an attempt to bring clarity to the game, I did a stream as Belgium here on my YouTube channel and over on Twitch, where I promised to play the game slow, examine the deeper workings of the game, and answer whatever questions came up. That stream was pretty educational, I think, so I'm looking to share it with some of the people who don't have time to watch a 4-hour long stream. With that, I've cut it up into this video here, and added some post commentary to further, and at times more succinctly, explain what it is I'm yapping about on the stream. I hope you enjoy. We're going to start with one basic principle. Before we take on too many questions, okay? I'm gonna do one sort of basic principle in Victoria 3, and that is de-peasanting, okay? A lot of people kind of wonder, like, okay, how do you actually increase like SOL? How do you increase GDP? And a lot of times the thing about increasing SOL you'll hear is that you need to decrease the cost of goods that are consumed, right? Okay. So if you decrease the cost of consumed goods, you're going to increase your standard of living. That's true. But a really good way to increase your standard of living is to give people jobs, right? If we look at peasants, so let's take a look at a peasant here. We have a lot of them here in Flanders. 1.4 million. We'll look at the Flemish ones because it's the biggest cohort. Okay. If you look at their economy, you see that this pop group, which is like over 1 million in size, makes 30,000 weekly income, which is, you know, mostly from their subsistence output. And that's not a lot of money. It's the reason why it looks like a lot is because there's over 1 million of them. If we look at, you know, it's a very small number. Okay. So they're not making a ton of money, and they're able to spend that money on this stuff, okay? But we could definitely like massively increase this income if we just gave them work to do, right? Give them something to do that isn't like working as a peasant. So for example, if we go into the actual subsistence farms and we take a look at the wages being paid here, a peasant makes, so they make a fifth. So here, this is how much they make, okay? They make 1/5 the wage of a laborer. To explain a bit more simply, peasants make very low wages, being a 0.2 multiplier on the base wage. Base wage is a number calculated based on the average standard of living among all pops in a state, and is also the wage paid to laborers, which is the most basic and low-skill job outside of peasants. Laborers can be replaced by slaves in slave economies to give you an idea of how low-skilled they are. That means that a peasant is generally living on a pretty tiny income and therefore cannot spend much. Better and better jobs have higher and higher wage multipliers, with engineers making some pretty sick money. Of course, we'll need industries that can pay out those wages, which we have lots of in Belgium. This is where profitability kind of matters, is that if we look at, for example, these explosive factories, they don't really make any money. So if we were to build one of these, it wouldn't be able to hire anyone. In fact, they're probably going to see once we unpause the game that this building is going to start losing its cash reserves and then start losing employment. And those pops are going to go back to being peasants probably. So we want to create jobs that will have good profits so that the capitalists can pay the peasants to work better jobs. Now, the reason why this matters, because again, you might say, okay, so we're going to increase the prosperity of our peasants, right? So they're going to gain standard of living. They're going to get new jobs and gain standard of living. That's cool. Why does that matter? The reason why that matters is because look at their expenses. Part of what they pay is an income tax, okay? So when a pop pays an income tax, that's how we translate, like, that's how we extract wealth from our economy into our budget. So if you look here, we're making like 7,500 K in income taxes, and that's all fine and good. We're also making almost 10K in poll taxes. These are taxes that are paid by peasants because they're peasants. Basically, like all peasants just pay a tax to exist. They are also paid by non-peasants, but at different rates. Poll taxes are the sum of land taxes and per capita taxes. With per capita tax law, non-peasants pay twice as much poll tax as peasants, while on land tax, only peasants pay a poll tax. The per capita tax on everyone that's not a peasant is much higher. So a per capita tax is 0.7. So for that reason, we want to get people out of the subsistence farms and into, you know, regular jobs. The reason why we want that is because we have per capita taxation. So if you're on land-based taxation, it can actually be better. For example, land-based taxation here gives 0.7 land tax, whereas per capita only gives 0.35. So if you're on land-based taxation, you may actually gain more tax out of having peasants than you would normally. So then the question is, how do we make new jobs? Well, we need to make buildings, right? And the buildings do. Making jobs sounds pretty simple since every building has a set of jobs that it'll create, but we have to account for qualifications. If you're playing Belgium, your literacy rate is high enough that qualifications are almost never a problem, but for developing nations that have less than 40% literacy, it can be tough. A qualification is a set of requirements for a POP to be able to work a job. It's best to think of qualifications as a sort of benchmark that a POP must meet in order to change jobs to the target job. These numbers are not listed anywhere, but I looked into the game files for you to help you understand. Looking at an engineer POP, they require a baseline of 20% literacy, and to not be a peasant with the serfdom law. That's the very lowest bar, but then we increase the rate at which POPs qualify to become engineers based on that POP's literacy and wealth, alongside a multiplier for machinists and clerks who get qualifications even faster. You can see qualifications being generated by clicking on a state and mousing over the qualifications checkmark, or X if you're missing some, and you can see how many are made each month. Although an engineer only needs 20% literacy, you'd be making such a slow trickle of engineers at that level that you'd need forever to possibly get enough to employ just one building. For that reason, higher literacy is good. As another example, the game files list capitalists as needing a minimum of 10 wealth, with extra qualifications gained for higher literacy and wealth, alongside a multiplier for engineers and shopkeepers, and a reduction for discriminated POPs. I won't show every job, but you can get a text-based explanation on the page of a POP, although this won't show any numbers. So essentially, you have this tiered system where peasants are at the bottom. Then there's like laborers, then maybe like you have a bit of another field of like farmers, machinists, so on. Then you have like clerks and shopkeepers. Each one has a different requirement. But basically, higher literacy is always good. Now, when you're Belgium, okay? When you're Belgium, you already have good enough literacy for most jobs. You don't have to worry about it too much. Nations like Britain, like you've already got 56% literacy average. You're already number one. You're never going to have a qualification problem as Britain or as like Sweden or as most of these countries. Where you'll have literacy problems is Russia, 14%. So you're going to have examples where you have peasants who could be working better jobs but who can't because they don't read good. Okay, that can happen. It also happens obviously in like China. Japan, funnily enough, because of the terracotta system, actually is fine. They don't even have to worry about literacy problems. They're good, but I would honestly recommend, if you're very new to the game, you should not start as those countries, because you'll just get fucked. Like, if you start as, like, the Marina Kingdom or something, like, I think their literacy is, like, what is their literacy? Like, 4% literacy? Like, you're gonna be stuck doing nothing until you get this number up, because you can't really do much. It's better to start as someone like Belgium for a little while. Either way, okay. We need to make jobs, and we see that we have 170,000 peasants in Wallonia, so let's make some jobs. Okay, we're just going to, we're going to start with some tools. The better heuristic, when you get better at the game, you'll get a better idea of how to predict the economy, because you saw there that I made like an inference about the price of iron. But a better way to start, if you're very new to the game and don't know how to predict prices like that, is just find something that's profitable and check for the predicted earnings per week, and just pick something that has good earnings per week. So let's look at these tools. Let's make ourselves a little tool industry, right? Let's click this until it's negative. So you see here now it's negative. Let's stop building it. That's basically the best heuristic I can give you in terms of what to do. It's like, okay, it's not profitable anymore. Stop building it. Let's wait for those to build, and we'll watch some peasants come in. It's certainly not a bad heuristic to just build whatever is profitable, but as you go, you'll want to plan your economy a bit. We're making jobs, which is good, but we also need to think about what those jobs are getting us in terms of goods. Tools are an industrial good, which is very useful for just about everything in the game. A business will buy goods and sell goods, hoping to make a profit on the cost of the combined labor and goods by selling the stuff it produces. When we make a tool industry using steel tool production methods, we're converting wood and steel into tools. You can never really go wrong with tools, since just about every industry uses them in some amount. Although in this case tools are profitable, a better play would be to make iron mines and expand my construction sectors to use the iron produced by those mines, since what the iron can contribute to my economy is more valuable than the tools. Like I said in the stream, you'll get a better idea of what's useful to your nation as you play more. Britain are making 3.39k in terms of budget. Budget is not the end-all be-all when it comes to the game. It might feel like it is, because this feels like it's... People often equate the budget in Victoria 3 to your income in, for example, EU4, but it's not quite the same. The budget is more like how much of your economy you're willing to sacrifice in order to have more control over your country. So when I collect taxes, this is like money that I can use for things like the army. I can use it for construction. I can use it for bureaucracy in order to make bureaucracy that I can then use on institutions. So that's what taxes are. But ultimately, like, it's not a sign of a healthy country if the income is good for the government. In fact, it's usually bad if you're just hoarding money. Yes, the budget. Like I said on stream, the budget is not a way to evaluate success for your nation in Victoria 3. The budget is a compromise between the desire to have a flourishing economy which can operate effectively and the need for the government to have some kind of money to work with. We need money for construction chiefly, but also things like the army. Every economy in Victoria 3 is a closed system where all money exists within it in some form or another. Money would normally flow from pop to pop, with most of it coalescing in the capitalists and aristocrats who make the profits, and that money would be spent on stuff. In Victoria 3, there is no money hoarding. Capitalists will spend all their money, if there are goods on the market to buy, in their pursuit of increasing their standard of living. They will do this up to a standard of living of 99, at which point I think there actually may be some money hoarding, since standard of living maxes out there, and their surplus income won't do anything. Regardless, the point is that your economy is an organism all its own, and you, when you act as the government, are extracting wealth from it via taxes so that you can manipulate that organism, which is most often done in the form of buildings. The object of the game, for most people, is to create a thriving economy, and needlessly pulling money from it is not particularly helpful, which is why taxes for no reason suck. That being said, taxes for a good reason are great. Taxes for the purpose of creating new buildings that create jobs and goods is absolutely a good reason for taxes. Taxes to fund an army that acquires new resources and labor for the market is also very useful, while taxes to build up a gold reserve are pretty much always a bad thing. This is all being said in an effort to explain that you should never tax more than you need to. If you're playing a highly militarized nation, like say Prussia, you'll want more taxes to fund your army, which you need to secure your economy. But if you're playing a nation like Belgium, you don't have much to spend money on besides construction, which is entirely valid to tax for. As you play the game more, you'll learn what good uses for taxes are and what bad uses are. But broadly speaking, just keep the question in your mind of whether or not the money you're removing from the economy is worth taking out. What are you accomplishing with those taxes? Anyway, so we just finished here. So that we just finished a tooling sector here, or tooling workshop, and we see it's already employing. So we've got so many peasants, right? The peasants are going to just drain out of the subsistence farms and immediately go into this workshop. So if you look where they're being hired from, looks like we're unemployed. We had some unemployed people, but we should see some people that were peasants coming in. We take a look. Any peasants come in? Okay, well, yeah. They're all coming from other jobs. But listen, okay, I'm right. Okay, they're coming in. They're coming in. Okay. What may be happening is that these peasants are exiting the subsistence farms, and then they're becoming unemployed and then joining the job. It's not always clear exactly where they're coming from, but point is that we're de-peasanting is what we're going for here. This sort of ambiguity is a common issue with Victoria 3. While the tooltips don't show it because of how strangely Victoria 3 sometimes conveys information, these are peasants working at the tool workshop. What's happening is that a peasant is leaving the subsistence farm, becoming unemployed right away, then the tooling workshop is looking for employees to hire, so it hires from wherever it can, including other buildings, which it pulls from by paying a slightly higher wage. Then the peasants that just became unemployed will fill in the lost jobs right away. Although it's being displayed weirdly, you'll see as this video goes that we are in fact getting rid of peasants in our nation, slowly but surely. We're having problems here with the weekly balance, so we see that we're paying too much, it looks like, for steel and wood. If you look at our inputs here, we're paying 2.95k for wages. Wages are determined by, so if you look at basically it's determined by the wealth need to sustain, the average wage to sustain the wealth in the state. So we can't really do much to influence this. One interesting way you can depress the wages in a business is to raise taxes, because then pops will be less wealthy because they're going to be like they call it, they're going to be paying more money into taxes. So for example, if we look at our workforce here, we look at these engineers, if we look at their economy, we can see that they're spending most of their money on their needs, right? Most of it's on tea. So there's all kinds of more weird ways you can change wages and stuff by, for example, making pops wealthier or making them poorer. But the main way would be to increase or decrease their taxes. The thing is that in general, when it comes to making a place more profitable, we don't want to reduce wages because wages are good. We want the workers to make more money because workers buy things. So if we look at, again, if you go back to these engineers are buying stuff. So they're buying tea, they're buying clothes, and when they buy these things, this will produce profits for, you guessed it, our clothes, right? You can see here that our clothes aren't even that profitable, mostly because fabric is so expensive. But they're going to increase the price on these clothes, as we can see by the pop consumption. So we don't want to reduce wages, generally speaking. That's probably a bad idea. Instead, we want to decrease the cost of their goods. So we see that wood's expensive, and steel is kind of expensive. Steel actually is pretty balanced. So steel is about where it should be, but wood is expensive. So let's try to make wood cheaper. So rather than continue building this tooling workshop, we're going to go down here. And one thing we can immediately do, we don't have to always build more stuff in order to increase our efficiency. We can instead change production methods. So we see here that we're making hardwood and we're making regular wood. We don't really have that much demand for hardwood compared to regular wood. So I'm just going to go here and I'm just going to say prioritize softwood production. You see the game agrees with me here. It believes that this will increase the balance, but it's going to make hardwood more expensive. So if we do this, now we should see that the tools will have an easier time being profitable. They're not in the, they're not in the black yet. They're still a little too expensive on wood, but they've gotten a little better. But now we have to check, did our choice to make hardwood more expensive match with other industries? For example, our furniture. In this case, it looks like the furniture can sustain the extra cost of the hardwood, so it's probably fine. We don't have to worry about it. But we want to continue to cheapen the input goods for this, so let's build some more logging camps. I did a pretty good job there explaining making businesses profitable, but in case it wasn't obvious, profits are useful for two things at this stage. First, profitable industries can employ POPs and pay them wages, which will let them buy goods that will increase profitability in other businesses. Secondly, the profits from a business go into the hands of a capitalist, who will reinvest a portion of that money into the investment pool, while also using their extra money to buy even more goods. Later on, this POP consumption of goods will be very important because a lot of our demand for clothes and furniture and other goods will be from our POPs. For now, we don't have a huge consumer economy, so most of our profitable buildings are industrial goods like steel, tools, wood, iron, and other such resources. Early game economies tend to see resources making the bulk of the profits, while late game economies will see consumer goods making up their profits. But the way that the private queue only checks profitability and nothing else. Because remember that the interest of the capitalists is just to make money, right? So all the capitalists are doing is checking for this number, the earnings weekly, not even productivity. They don't care about productivity, they care about the earnings. So they just check, and they're just like, okay, can we make more money? Yes. And basically they'll just scan the entire market for whatever's profitable. They do take into account, for example, you actually see here that we can see this happening in real time. They saw that we needed wood because our tooling industry is going to be requiring wood. So the capitalists started making logging camps for me. This is probably because the private queue saw that I was making more tools and was like, we need to make some wood to account for that. I mentioned in the previous post-commentary interjection about how the capitalists will invest in the investment pool. Private construction uses the investment pool to build things, and it will only care about profits, since that's all the capitalists will care about. A common complaint from new players will be that the capitalists are making useless things like art when they want the capitalists to build stuff like steel or iron and other actually useful goods. This is because you, as the player, have not given the capitalists a market that incentivizes those goods. This example I had in the stream was very lucky in how well placed it was. The capitalists anticipated my upcoming tooling workshops and decided wood was necessary. It is a key note to remember here that the private sector takes into account what you've queued up into the construction queue. Learning to manipulate the capitalists into making what you want them to make is a very important skill for any capitalistic playstyle. If you queue up tooling workshops, which will spike the price of wood, then the capitalists will see that and decide to preemptively make logging camps in order to fill the future demand that you'll be generating. When should I practice nationalize? When should I let other nations build in me? So you privatize when you prioritize profits on the industry. So for example, if we look at this tool industry, the throughput is being harmed by the fact that some of this is government owned. Not a lot, to be fair, not a ton. But if I were to privatize this, which it probably won't immediately privatize because we don't have enough money in the investment pool for it. But if we privatize these, then they're going to get a larger throughput, which means they'll produce more goods. If we keep it government owned, we can in theory make some more profits. But I'm being totally honest with you. Like I'm just being real, okay? There's never really a situation where government owned is kind of better. Like I've really tried to do like interventionist, like government owned runs before. The amount of money that you make on most industries is so pitiful compared to how much you can make from the investment pool. So consider like the financial district in Wallonia, right? They're making like 938 in dividends from the tooling workshops, okay? Now some of that's going to get paid out to the workforce. It's going to get paid out to the capitalists, right? Now, 2,000 of this total is going to reinvestment, which means it goes into the investment pool. But keep in mind that when this money is paid out to the capitalists, it doesn't mean that it gets hoarded away. They're spending the money. So they're going to spend money on stuff, which will then also increase profits on other buildings, which will then also create more reinvestment. There's a compounding effect, right? So generally speaking, it's usually just not a good idea to nationalize. The only time it can be good is foreign stuff. So for example, if let's say Britain owned, let's say Britain had a bunch of stuff in my country, like they had a bunch of iron mines, then I'd want to nationalize those so that the profits wouldn't leave my country. Can I take a major in economics compared to Vic 3? No, Vic 3 doesn't. Vic 3 uses like imaginary economics, to be honest. So no, I wouldn't say so. Rich people spend most of their money. Yeah, that's the thing. It's not like that in reality, right? But in the game, it is like that. Rich people do spend their money. The way to turn off the private construction? Well, the only way to truly turn it off is to go command economy. This would turn off the private sector completely, command economy. But if you have an issue where your private sector is only making like whaling stations and stuff, then you need to create demand for goods that aren't, you know, oil and whaling stations and things like that. You need to basically create a situation where making furniture would be profitable. So let's say, for example, let's say that I had a problem where all my capitalists were choosing to make like something useless like fish, okay? Sorry to the Scandinavians, all right? Let's say that happened. Well, I'd rather that they make tools. So I need to make a situation where tools are more profitable than fish. Now in this case, in the case of my country, fish are not that profitable compared to tools. But if they were, I would want to go in here and I'd want to increase, or rather decrease, the price of steel and wood by making more steel and more wood. That way, you know, that way you can have a more profitable tool industry, and then your capitalists will make it. So for example, here, my capitalists are making tools because they see that tools are making good money. So they're like, yeah, that sounds good. When should you build in your own country, and when should you just import? You should always choose to build in your own country if you can. But for example, I can't make dyes in Belgium, so for that reason I import dyes. So if we look here at my dyes, these are all through. Well, actually, we don't have any dyes. We just choose to make. We just accept that we have none, but still consume some anyway. Because Victorian economics is funny. Or rather, no. Here we go. Never mind. We do have some. It's just that it wasn't the local market. This is the toll market. We're importing from Britain, because we can't make dyes. So in that case, we have to import, right? In fact, we probably should import more. Let's import some from the Dutch. We have to import because we can't make them. But generally speaking, if you can, you do want to make it yourself, because then you can get the profits from it, right? Contrary to real-life economics, in Victoria 3, the autarky is always best. Trade in Victoria 3, in almost every case, is not as good as local production. Exports can be fine, but again, autarky is best, simply because you can never generate a significant enough demand for a good off of just an export to make an industry profitable. The only exception is in case of a vast trade difference, like when exporting opium to Qing with no tariffs. In that case, all the cards are stacked just right to make the opium market viable completely with trading. In every other case, you should always create local supply and local demand for goods. Even though the British surely produce some hundreds or maybe thousands of units of dye, if I could secure just one dye plantation myself, I'd have a far healthier dye supply than what the British can supply me with. One solid strategy is sort by the highest price and just continuously build whatever's expensive until it's not expensive anymore, and repeat this loop until ad nauseum. It's a bit of a basic strategy, but you can absolutely do that. If you look at what we're building here, we're still making, looks like we're making more lumber. We're starting to probably make too much lumber. Let's privatize these because we want to get more throughput. Our lumber is becoming less profitable because we're making too much of it, so let's find ways to use this lumber. So if you look at the applications, we could use it in paper, tools, furniture, lots of stuff. I think we probably want to use it for something that we, like, you know, that is profitable. But here's where we should talk about some economic planning, right? Okay. So the reason why the strat of just make whatever is expensive doesn't always work is because you want to plan your economy to some extent. You want to think ahead, right? Now I know that I'm going to start making more construction sectors, and construction sectors are going to need iron. So I'm like, even though iron is not super well, it's actually pretty profitable, but even though iron will not be profitable, you know, for long, if I keep building more of it, I might build a lot of it with the intention of later on, or perhaps even very soon, making construction sectors. One thing we're running into a problem with, though, is that we are running out of infrastructure. Infrastructure, we just need more railways, but then we see that we're running out of engines too. So, you know, we need to also make some railways. So we're going to do that. We also need engine. Do a little supply chain. See, this is what's called planning, right? So I know what expenses are coming up. I know that I'm going to need engines, although I already need them right now. We can import them for now. Well, we kind of can't. Nobody really makes engines. We're going to need them soon, so I'm building them now. And I've queued up stuff. So we see that we've queued up things here. And this is kind of like me doing some economic planning, right? We're going to do the construction sectors first, because I want to get my construction going. Yeah. Like, ultimately, the best way to, like, liberalize a country is just to make the right kind of jobs. So, in terms of which pops will tend towards more liberal politics, it's usually richer ones that will tend towards more, like, more capitalism, more liberalism in general. So, for example, don't worry about this. If we look at, like, the way that the engineers choose to support stuff, they tend to support the industrialists and the petite bourgeoisie. The petite bourgeoisie aren't super liberal, but they're more liberal than, say, like, the landowners, right? But if you look at a laborer, so if you look at a laborer over here, for example, they're probably going to support, like, well, they're actually, they don't even care about politics, these ones, but there should be some that do care about politics somewhere. See if we can find them. They might not even care about politics, in which case they also are not good for your politics, right? Yeah, it looks like the laborers don't actually really support any group right now. Maybe we need different text to get that to go. The machinists, though, also don't care. Wow, okay. Most lower income pops won't support any interest groups until you get the labor movement tech, which will trigger lower income pops to start supporting political movements. For this reason, it can be a pretty important tech for nations trying to liberalize. Despite the politically inactive laborers, it's still important to note that different pops support different groups, and that the general trend is that better jobs support interest groups that usually are better for the country if your goal is liberalization, which in Victoria 3 is the best choice in just about every case outside of roleplay. Would you rather fight one horse-sized chicken or 10 chicken-sized horses? I feel like... I don't even know. I feel like probably the chicken-sized horses. That would probably be easier. I imagine that a chicken-sized horse would be relatively easy to simply kick or stomp on compared to a horse-sized chicken who could probably peck my eyes out with enough speed to catch me off guard. This would also depend heavily on the size of the chickens when we refer to chicken-sized. For example, are we talking about a McDonald's chicken nugget or more like a chicken strip from a frozen box in the grocery store? I'd assume the chicken strip more accurately maps onto the anatomy of a horse and therefore would be a more suitable shape and size. Therefore, these are relatively small, off-balance chickens. Anyone who's ever seen chickens before knows that the nuggets generally form a more stable tower geometrically than the strips, which are easier to manipulate. A quick lesson about consumption taxes, in general, is that different pops consume different things, right? So in general, as a general heuristic, we want to take any given pop who is poor and we'd like to make them rich, because when they're rich, they will buy more things and they will be able to increase the wages in their area. And the more they buy, the more profitable our industries get. So we don't want to add consumption taxes to things that pops consume who are of low tier. So we see here that engineers consume liquor. If you look at his expenses, he's probably paying a consumption tax on his liquor, so yeah, and his services. Now, engineers are relatively wealthy. They're the middle ground, okay? They're relatively wealthy. So giving them consumption taxes isn't so bad. I'd say it's okay to give them taxes. In general, we want to put consumption taxes on goods that are consumed by the richest pops, like the capitalists. Because if you look at the capitalists over here, for example, they are very, 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 very wealthy. And they are spending a lot of money on stuff. So, proportionally speaking, if we were to add a consumption tax to, say, tea, let's try that, right? Let's see about tea, where is it? So we add it to tea, it's not really gonna, like, change their standard of living very much. So they're gonna be spending, like, let's play the game for a second. They're gonna be spending, like, a tiny bit of their money on consumption taxes compared to how much of their total income. So, it's probably better to generally put consumption taxes on the richer people as opposed to the poorer ones. For example, if you do this looks attractive because it's 2k income for 500 authority. First of all, 500 authority is a ripoff. But second of all, if we do this, okay, our pops are going to suddenly be spending a lot more money on grain. Because if we look at what the average consumer of grain is, so if we look at our market, most of the grain consumers are going to be relatively poor. So it's half of all grain consumption is from the laborers. 307 of 603. So laborers consume most of it. So if you look at the economy of the laborers, let's just, I don't know, pick laborers from here. These guys are spending 26% of their income on grain. If we were to add a consumption tax, that would add an additional, if we just, I'm not going to keep this tax here. This is just for demonstration purposes, okay? Do not do this. We have to pass a day, I think, to put the consumption tax to go in. So now he's spending an additional 17 on grain, which is pretty significant when his income is this low, compared to, like, you know, an additional 100 on the capitalists. So we're not going to do that. There's a ridiculous amount of money, and instead we'll put a consumption tax maybe on, like, meat. something like that. Consumption taxes are a great way to supplement your budget without actually raising taxes via the clickable tax buttons. This is a good idea because raising overall taxes comes with negatives to legitimacy, radicals, and loyalists, while adding a consumption tax doesn't necessarily do that. In general, the principle of taxing the rich in preference to the poor still stands, and as you get more experienced, you'll have an instinctual idea of what goods each pop consumes, but while you're inexperienced, feel free to check your pops to see what they consume and add consumption taxes appropriately. So the problem we're having right here is that transportation is very cheap, which means the railways are not profitable, and we're actually paying even more than it looks because we're also paying, this is what subsidies do. Subsidies cover the expenses of the country, or of the business, and they also force the wages up to the national average, which is what a normal wage is. When it says subsidies to sustain normal wage in Belgium, this is referring to the normal wage is I wish they would word it more simply. It says the baseline wage in a country which may be taken into account. What this is the average wage across all of your incorporated states. It says it right here, determined by. I wish it would just say it like first. This is basically the base wage. So you could say it's the minimum wage. You might even say, if you want to look at it from like a real life comparison, this is your minimum wage, right? If a business is not giving a wage that's equal to the minimum wage, subsidies will push the wage up to the minimum. So we see we're adding additional 2.25 to create a minimum wage, which means that we're paying £1,000 here to make this work. Now we can increase the profitability on this by making transportation more expensive. And the way to do that is a couple ways. Transportation is usually consumed by pops. So if you look here, it's consumed by like capitalists and stuff. It'll be because it's an upper, you see capital 58, you're consuming it, right? Okay. But one way we can help with it is we can go in here. We see we're having hiring problems anyway, okay, because we're running out of laborers. Let's just put rail transportation on this. Rail transportation removes jobs, but consumes transportation instead. So removing jobs sounds bad, but keep in mind that we're only removing laborers. So we're removing laborer jobs in order to create a higher price in transportation, and that way we can make our railways profitable, and also it'll create unemployed pops. So you see, we just made 2,000 unemployed people. We just fired 2,000 people, but now they can get better jobs. They can work as like engineers or as shopkeepers or whatever else they can work as. They can work better jobs than working as a laborer. Because laboring kind of sucks, right? Also, we get this event from doing that, so cool. We see now that this is making more money. We're still paying a subsidy to maintain the normal wage, but as the wages get higher and higher here, that'll go away. Subsidies are very important for some industries, like railways, which you always want working for the infrastructure, but subsidies can also kill your government budget if mismanaged. Businesses which are subsidized should always be made profitable to avoid having to pay heavy subsidies for them, but keep in mind that even a profitable business will take subsidies to get its wages up to the minimum wage, which is why you might see a profitable, subsidized business continuing to steal your money. So why laissez-faire is really good is because the private constructor allocation, so that's really good. Also, the capitalist investment pool contribution efficiency, which basically means that all capitalists give more money to the investment pool. So there's a couple different ways you can extract wealth from pops, right? The most direct way, is taxes. This is like the most obvious way to steal. There's my libertarian aspect coming out. The most direct way to take money from a pop is through taxes, right? The problem is that if you look at a capitalist's income, most of the capitalist income is coming from dividends. And until later in the game, you don't really tax dividends that much. So we see here, we're taxing him through through per capita taxes, which is what everyone pays, and consumption taxes. Okay, if we look at his income, almost all his income comes through dividends. But the only tax law that gives dividend taxes, well, the only two, are proportional, which gives a 2.5% rate, which is like nothing, and a graduated, which is 10%. Graduated is base because it gives you a lot more dividend tax rate. So until we get this, which is only really supported by the trade unions, only trade unions want like better, these kind of tax laws. Until we get one of these two tax laws, it's very hard to extract wealth from our pops. So one way we can do it is through the investment pool. This is like an indirect form of taking money. If you look at the capitalists don't pay it though, the financial sector does, but this is basically, you see 3.5k is taken, and this is put into our investment pool, which is a way that we can turn money from the capitalists into, productive money instead of having it be wasted. I say wasted. The capitalists do buy things, but obviously, them just buying a lot of stuff isn't always the best way to translate their money into something good for the country. This is the power of laissez-faire. We can effectively turn more of the immense capitalist wealth into jobs and goods by making them want to invest more money into the economy. We can also make better use of the investment pool by allowing the capitalists to use more of it. Until later in the game, when we get dividend tax laws, we can't really touch the capitalist hoard of wealth, so they're just buying goods, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not as good of a thing as if we can get them to invest further into the economy, which laissez-faire encourages. Alongside that, laissez-faire also gives another company slot, which is wonderful, as companies are very powerful. We're not going to bankrupt because once we get laissez-faire, that's first of all, it's going to reduce our interest payments, but second of all, if I ever worry I'm going to bankrupt, if I ever feel like, oh man, my debt's getting too high, I gotta stop, I just click this button, and then I will start making money again, and my private sector can take over. When you're not using your construction, your capitalist will use it for you, so it's okay to pause your construction here and there, if you ever need to. I don't really think I need to, though. I think I can keep going. I'm gonna keep going. But, yeah, it's totally fine to every once in a while just pause your construction if you need. Yeah, as countries like Qing, your interest rate is way higher. You don't want to do that. As Qing, you don't want to go into debt because your interest rate is too high. It's just way, way too high to possibly handle. All right, we got a new company. Companies are pretty important. Not super important, but they're relatively important, mostly because they give a throughput bonus on every building that they support, right? So it's pretty simple. Like, you know, you can get into a lot of discussions about which companies are best because of what they give at their prosperity levels. But it's important to not forget the throughput and the construction bonus, especially. If I grab this Metal Guilds of Wallonia, we know we're going to build a lot of iron. So if I grab this, then we're going to immediately see that now this is going to get built a lot faster because we're going to be able to add 30%. Sorry, well, I think, yeah, this is the company, right? Yeah, almost 30% extra construction efficiency. So that's great. And each of these mines will also produce even more iron. Because if you look at the output, the output is basically increased by 21%. Great. Absolutely do not underestimate the power of the construction and throughput bonuses on a company. The prosperity bonus is one thing and should be considered, but being able to build more of a key industry like iron is absolutely huge. One thing we'll do to help is now we're going to do some decrees. I was ignoring decrees for vlogs. I didn't want to like overcomplicate things, but we absolutely should make some decrees. So we're going to do that. We're going to add a resource industry decree to Wallonia, so we're going to get even more throughput on our mines, right? So by doing this, also we go urbanize Belgium, which is nice. I guess we'll just take the loyalists, sure. By doing this, we're going to get even more throughput on the iron mines, which means that we're going to get even more profit. And more profit means more stuff for the financial district. It means they will invest more into the economy, which means more investment pool. And anyway, I actually want to... so one thing I actually want to do, this is going to sound kind of weird, but I feel like what I've demonstrated here, okay, I want to... this stream kind of has like an express purpose, which is like this sort of tutorializing kind of thing going on. I actually was something a little interesting. I'm going to quit and restart as Belgium now, but do a little bit more. Like a little bit more. I'm going to like add on to the strategy here. So what I've just shown you there as Belgium is how to like de-peasant, right? What the priority should be. So we saw that by me making all those jobs, I was getting higher income taxes and getting higher poll taxes because the peasants don't pay as much tax, which was giving me more ability to make more construction sectors and making me able to get more powerful. Now I want to combine that with some diplomacy and some colonization from the early game, right? This whole time, I was playing with my hands tied behind my back in the effort to focus solely on my economy as a teaching moment for the chat. I'm restarting my Belgium run here and now incorporating more than just economy building, since Victoria 3 is about so much more than just the economy. From here, I'll be interjecting a bit less often and instead letting my live counterpart here explain what's going on as we go. Also, we're going to do something, most of you who've seen my channel by this point know this strategy, but we're going to be, you know, balkanizing India and joining in on the Opium Wars. We're going to play, not optimally, not like perfectly optimally, but pretty optimally in this situation. We're also going to immediately go to laissez-faire, just like right off the bat, because we can. Most OP country is Britain, just straight up. Just Britain is the most overpowered. France can compete because they have a big army, so they can just like, if you have a smart France who attacks Britain early, then you can win as France. But the reason why Britain is so overpowered is because they have a lot of financial sectors. So they start the game with like 126 of these, and these things are probably producing a ton of reinvestment. So like 6,000 reinvestment. They've got even more over here. Like, you know, they got a ton of capitalists just doing work. Whereas, for example, France, if we look at them, 24 financial sectors. 7, you know, like 5, 1, like almost nothing, right? Minor houses are not bad too, but you want financial sectors more than anything, really. There's the Opium War incoming. So we're going to join this war with the intention of, you know, Like, we're basically gonna see if we can get something out of it. I mean, maybe we can. If I just, like, add 1,000,000 conscripts. One key in mind is that when the AI evaluates your contribution to a war, they will check your conscripts. Now I see we can get something. So we're going to join the war and try to grab something out of China if we can. Britain, we're not going to actually fight the war, to be clear. We're just going to let Britain win the war. So let's see what we can get. We can grab Kenya, which I don't think is worth it when it's this tiny. We could grab investment rights. I don't really care for that. We could get a war goal. We can get Lanfang, which isn't really that good. It can be fun to try and go for like a conquer state type thing, but it's not always doable. To liberate country, we should liberate someone. So one thing you can do to troll Britain, this is like a funny thing you can do. Britain is grabbing the Xiaozhou, Xiaozhou, I don't know, you know, they're grabbing a treaty port in Hong Kong, basically, which is what they normally do, okay? Now, if you were to offer support for a goal, liberate country, and you were to do UA, if you do UA, then that will mean that the Xiaozhou treaty port will be invalid, because it will be in UA and not in China, which is really funny. It's a way you control. You know what we can do, actually? Here's one thing we can do to increase our ability to gain more stuff, is we can put down an enlistment decree in Wallonia. That lets us get more conscripts, which will puff up, you know, it's like puffing up our chest, right? Looking more powerful. This will make Britain maybe want to give me a little more stuff. So now they want to give me a conquer state, which is great. Okay, not a bankroll, unfortunately. Transfer state, probably still just Kenya. Or we can get South Cameroon, which also probably is very tiny. Yeah, so that's not worth getting. No, if we were to grab a state, we'd want it to be something like Zhejiang or like Suzhou. These are like really good to get. They've got these really good they got silk and stuff. I'd like a place that has dyes and silk. This would be like optimal. So Fujian is probably the best pick. Suzhou Xiaozhou would be good, but I don't think Britain wants to give it to us when we're getting the treaty port out of there. I think we're gonna get Fujian. That's probably the best one. Beijing, we don't have an interest in North China, so we can't do. We have an interest in South China, not North China, so we can't do Beijing. Beijing is a good pick, though. Definitely. We're gonna go for Fujian, though. This is just like free real estate, so we might. Then we join the war, and we're not gonna do anything. We just join the war and then let Britain win the war for us. If you're going to war a lot, professional army is way better. So as Britain, professional army is sick because you're almost always at war. If you're Belgium, though, or if like America as an example, America's not really at war that often, unless they're playing really hardcore, in which case maybe they are. But someone like, you know, France, Britain, Prussia, these are countries that are almost always at war, then you definitely want it. And yeah, we are going to attack a Prince State. So for those that don't know, there's currently an exploit in the game where you can force India out from the British Empire by being on the same side as Britain in a war. So because we're on the same side in a war, Britain can never join a war against me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attack a princely state. Let's attack, like, you know, I don't know, let's attack Owad, because I don't plan to go to war with them. Let's attack them. We're going to just pick the ban slavery. Whatever, it doesn't matter. We hit this, and now we're going to see that we're going to war with the EIC. And normally what would happen is Britain would obviously Britain would defend the East India Company, because they want to protect their subject. But they can't. They are unable to join the war against me, because they're on a war with me. So they can't be at war with me and in a war, like, to help me. You know, we can't be in a war together and a war against each other. So the EIC is going to basically just be stuck here with no one to help them. And the way that Victoria 3 works, if a overlord fails to protect their subject in a war for any reason, that subject goes free, for free. They just are allowed to be completely free. So we're going to let this war go through. I don't plan to actually participate. I'm just going to capitulate, basically. It'll cost me reparations, and that's, you know, whatever. But it means India will go free. And that is pretty PogChamp, if I say so myself. As you can see, East India is already immediately free. They're not their own country. And they're going to split up into 2 million pieces later on. Here comes the end of the Opium War. Here, so we get Fujian for free. East India is again at war, though. So they won't split up until the war ends. That's when, like, the big balkanization happens, by the way, is when they're at peace. We immediately have a problem where we have no market access. That's because there's no port in Fujian. So we're going to first build a port or anything else. Here's the balkanization of India, by the way. Now that they got to peace, this is what happens. Now we're going to take full advantage of the balkanization here of India. We're going to declare an interest in South India, and we want to grab. So if you look at some of these countries, right, they splits kind of randomly. So we should see that places like Andhra, which was taken by Orissa, are not going to be incorporated states. Once we have the interest here, I'll show you something. The amount of infamy you take for conquering a we call it incorporated state is so little compared to an incorporated state that we can take stuff like Bombay and Andhra for like nothing. So check this out. It's actually 0 infamy. Okay. Wow. We've done it. We've done it. This is a 0 infamy conquest, okay? Does it intend to reunify? No, it might try, but it never does. There's no infamy cost for this. So, based. If we were to try to conquer Orissa, which I believe is an incorporated state, it would cost 6.6. But we actually have enough modifiers to make a 0 infamy war. Free. It's literally free. We're going to declare this now. They might accept, and I don't want anything besides Andhra, so let's do that. Maybe they'll accept it. No. You see, it didn't cost any infamy to declare this war, which is hilarious. If we make an alliance with Britain, right? And then we call them into a war. Anytime that they're spending in a war helping me fight someone is time they're not spending in a war doing something for themselves. So I'm going to just call Britain into every war that I can, because then they're going to be busy helping me instead of helping themselves. This is kind of like a very sweaty, like, it doesn't really matter that much, but like it is technically a good play of like just always bring Britain into every war, because that way they're busy helping you and not busy helping themselves. You know, it's a small thing, but it can matter a little bit, I guess. So yeah, we're gonna conquer Orissa here for literally 0 infamy, or at least what feels like 0 infamy, and then we'll go for stuff like Bombay, which probably be a very similar situation. So the lower rank a country is, the less infamy they get. So what was happening was that unincorporated state is immediately half off infamy. That's just period, half off. Unrecognized regional power is minus 40%, for a total of minus 90. Unrecognized power is minus 50. So it was 0% infamy cost. In this case, 2.2 infamy is so low that obviously it's completely worth doing. In fact, they might even just back down and give it to me for free. So let's see. They did not. I'm never lucky, but you know, whatever. And then we can also make them a protectorate for like 2 infamy. So sure, why not, right? Let's do that. We'll call on our boy Britain to help us out, because we might as well. Oh, France decided they want to defend Indore. Okay, that's interesting. That's kind of a problem. France has decided that they will not stand for this. Okay. This is interesting. So in this situation, it might be best to back down, because the problem is that with Britain's help, I think we'd be able to win. But there's no guarantee the British will contribute a good enough number of people to help out, so we're just going to back down. It happens. We need to have better relations with France if we do more of this stuff. Unfortunately, France doesn't like me very much. They're domineering. Good. I'd like to fix that, so we're going to try to improve relations. When you have a deficit of ports, it reduces your supply network efficiency. And what that translates to effectively, currently in the game, there is no supply routes for armies. They do take up convoys. But if, for example, your supply network is weak, it won't affect your army in any way. So don't worry about that. What it does affect is market access. So you see here we have 81% market access in all of India and in China. And that's because of our low convoys. But in terms of the army, in old patches, having no supply strength did make your armies like useless. But now it doesn't. They just like, I don't know if they bugged it or moved intentionally, but currently armies do not suffer any penalties for having low convoys. Matter. Even though they consume convoys, they just doesn't do anything. So the reason why we're grabbing these high pop states is so that we can start getting immigrants back home. Because we're going to eventually run out of pops. You know, we're far away from that for now, but eventually we're going to. So we're planning ahead. Also, it's because of the plantation goods. So we want the access to the dyes, we want access to the opium. All this stuff is very, very strong. But it will eventually be for the population. France being hostile is really scary, honestly. We need a way to, like... to maybe like break France apart in some way. If we could get like, yeah, see if we can get like Prussia and Britain to help us. Maybe we just declare a war on France and just break them into pieces to try and harm them. That might be our best bet, because we really need to like break France apart, because they're just way too strong right now. So one thing to note about whenever you're going into a play and you're doing something that will add infamy. So if you look at when we declare a play to take the Low Countries like this, right? We see that we're going to generate 28.7 infamy, which is going to harm relations with these countries. You know, minus 14 with Prussia, minus 14 with Britain. Now, I'm pretty sure Britain's going to support us no matter what, because we're allies. But in the case of Prussia, with minus 14, Prussia might be less willing to help us in the war with that minus 14 relations, although they're friendly, so probably not. But and yeah, so they're probably gonna help us anyway. But it can be a consideration. It's like, okay, we don't want to, we don't want to lose the help from the ally because we do this first. What we do is we're gonna start the war using a diplomatic demand that is not the one that generates infamy. So we're gonna liberate Occitania to start, which generates no infamy. This will be what we'll start with. Okay, you want a war goal? I'm willing to. We have to wait till Britain comes in. I'm willing to give Prussia Alsace-Lorraine if they want it. Yeah, you can have Alsace-Lorraine, Prussia. Then I want French Low Countries, preparation. Pretty sure with Prussia's help we got this. Like, come on now, surely. To do a proper naval invasion, you have to have as many ships as you have battalions. If you have that, then your naval invasion will be okay. This should be fine. Now I see we've got the advantage on both fronts. I think we'll be just fine. Oh, wait, these guys don't even have the good mobilization options, bruh. Turn those on, man. There you go. The reason you turn these on is because basically you use more goods, but you get more stuff, and more stuff is usually worth the cost of the goods, like pretty much every case. This will allow us to neuter the French army before they can, before they can get too big. Then we can just, run through France, and we'll liberate Occitania, Brittany. We'll give Alsace-Lorraine to Prussia. I'm taking the Low Countries. Get nice and big. What to do if people don't want to work in a building that you need, even workforce is available? Then you subsidize. When you subsidize a building, even if other buildings are more profitable, people will still work in that building preferably. So watch this, right? This ammo industry seems to be having troubles employing, so I'm going to subsidize it. And now it's just going to force people in. Even if they have to leave other industries, they're just going to come in, and it doesn't matter. They're going to be forced in here. So that's one way you can force pops into a place that you need, is through subsidies. That's right, Nagand. I do ignore messages all the time, and it is because I hate chat. Got him. Great. So there you go. We've split them up into a bunch of pieces. That's great. We're going to incorporate this because it's our one of our primary culture home. And then we need more bureaucracy, so let's work on that. Every once in a while, don't forget to check your production methods, by the way. I kind of forgot to. We only have one paper mill in the whole country? Jeez, dude. That cannot stand. Desperately need more paper. Does it make sense to build your barracks overseas in colonies? Mostly not. Just because when you have the production method on your barracks that requires you to have officers, it's hard to get officers in these areas because they usually are of accepted culture, and you don't have a lot of those around. Only servicemen or pops of accepted culture can be officers, so you tend to have trouble with getting officers in overseas barracks. So what's the chance that they back down here? It's a pretty high chance. We could just add more war goals and hope that they back down. But I think I'm good. I think I'm just gonna conquer Luxembourg. And then I guess we can revoke claims anyway. Maybe they'll back. I don't really care if they keep the claim on Flanders, so I'm just gonna propose peace deal where they don't lose their claim. There you go. Now we have the Netherlands as a protectorate. We're gonna bring in privileged relations. They're very upset with me, which is reasonable. Let's try to fix that. We basically just need to get them more economically dependent. Here's what we can build on them to do that. We're just gonna build up their wood, because their logging camps are probably the most profitable thing they have and the highest GDP. We have a lot of Chinese immigrants here, which is great. That's more labor to use back here. The big reason why, so in terms of why migration is kind of based and probably better than spreading your industries out, is that so these 300,000 Min workers that previously were in Fujian, you might say, okay, why wouldn't you just build jobs for them over here? And that's the obvious answer to that is, well, it's unincorporated, so we can't tax it. That's one answer. Okay, another one is there might be turmoil here, so there's less, it's harder to build, although there's no turmoil here in this case. But the big reason why ultimately you prefer to sort of centralize your population into one spot is that Wallonia here has local access to coal, iron, sulfur, lead, and wood. That's important because the local price for this good is going to be much lower because we produce so much of it here. So every time I make an industry that uses any of these goods, we're paying less on the input goods because there's local production of it. Not to mention, there's the throughput bonus from the economy of scale. So because we have all of the industries built in one spot, we're going to get a larger throughput bonus, which means more profits. So it's generally better to centralize populations into one state if you can, rather than spreading them around. I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't want to do it. Nothing off the top of my head anyway. If your capitalists are spamming fine arts, then you need to just build things, you need to make an incentive to make industries that are profitable. For example, if you want capitalists to make more furniture, then build lots of wood, hardwood, tools, and whatever else you need in order to make furniture so that the capitalists see profit there. If you're having a lot of issues, for example, these furniture is the most productive in the game right now. So my capitalists probably will expand these eventually. Maybe not right away. It's probably somewhere in the queue. Well, it looks like not. But you want to make it so that your capitalists want to want to build things that you want to build by making those things profitable. Tip for passing public health. Do it early in the game when you still have a strong Catholic Church, or whatever the name of your religious folk will be in your run. Because they will support it. If you have no healthcare, they'll support going to public healthcare. If you don't do it early, then the religious folk become weak. You have to wait till the trade unions are powerful. If you want to strengthen your religious folk, go to your urban centers. And never mind. If you have state church, you can do state-run churches. But you can also go to your universities if you have any. You switch it to clerical educators to generate clergymen. And on your administration, you go to administrative clergy to generate clergymen. This way you can get a bunch of clergymen, basically. So Kyushu is a nice state, because they've got coal, which is good, but they've also got dyes and silk and cotton. It's like really nice stuff to use for bringing back home. We're going to notice here that I've skipped a ton of time, and that's mostly because all I'm doing is the same loop of building and conquering over and over. Victoria 3 is a game of repeating cycles. You build stuff up, then you need resources, so you conquer a state and use its resources. To be completely transparent though, I'm only conquering because I may as well be. Wallonia in Belgium has enough iron and coal to power an economy for most of the game, and it's not until maybe the 1880s or 1890s that an experienced player might have a large enough economy to exhaust the iron and coal reserves of Wallonia. If you're wondering why you should conquer stuff even if you have no shortage of resources, it's because you want to get labor, and you also want to deny the future land from your rivals. Although Great Britain is my ally in this playthrough, I don't want them to get more out of the alliance than me, so I'm using them to fight wars for my benefit wherever possible. We're number 3 great power, by the way. That's not bad. We're behind Prussia slightly, and we're actually catching up to Britain. I'm surprised at Britain's lack of prestige, but it's probably because they probably lost control, because they lost control of India. They lost a lot of their prestige. Makes sense. How does economic leverage work, and does it give bonuses if you go to war with the country you invest in? Economic leverage does absolutely nothing except for generate leverage for power block purposes. So if we look at Brittany here, I don't think I have any economic leverage over them because I don't have investment rights. But basically, like all that it would do for me getting the economic leverage on them is just give me more leverage for the purpose of the more leverage advantage is what it's called. It doesn't actually do anything. I wish it did stuff. I wish there was a benefit to it, but there's no benefit to it besides getting leverage for the purpose of power block stuff. It really should do something if you ask me, but it doesn't. It doesn't. There's 10 great powers, dude. This is a world where there's so many great powers. It's crazy. There are 10 great powers in the game. It's 20 years. Okay, in that case, they definitely completed. Number 2 GDP, by the way, just behind Great Qing. So we're basically the highest of the great powers. But the reason why I say just a bit when it comes to being behind China's GDP is that our GDP is growing significantly fast. Look at his GDP line. So look at this. Okay. Oh my god, bro. Thank you. Look at this GDP line. And look at my GDP line. I'm going to catch up pretty fast. It's not going to take long until I'm at the Chinese GDP. Netherlands. Okay, we can do it. Decrease autonomy. Then we can click this. From Netherlands. Now we are Burgundy. Now it says they leave the Benelux system, but they don't actually leave it. It just says that for. Yeah. Now we are Burgundy. Isn't that cool? This is our market. Very nice looking. Number 2 great power, by the way. 63. Okay, we can definitely inflate our prestige real quick if we just start conscripting. We can get to number 1. Hold on, watch this. We're gonna hit number 1 GD. We're gonna hit number 1 power real quick. We're just gonna inflate it by making conscripts, because remember that conscripts increase everything. I want to hit number 1. I think it'll be funny to be number 1 great power. Why is Britain so low, man? There you go, number 1. Boom, number 1 great power in 1863 as Burgundy. Obviously, we don't own Burgundy. Burgundy's down here. You know, that'd be a fun thing to go after, like the real Burgundy eventually. But I think that's pretty good for like a Belgium tutorial. Okay, hit number 1 great power in like 1863. Didn't take long, you know. I'm gonna cut this video, and I'm not gonna like upload just like a straight cut VOD for the YouTube channel. I'm gonna add some post commentary and kind of discuss more about some of the lessons that we learned in this this little tutorial thing. But basically, like, we secured a bit of India to get resources that we didn't have. We mostly focused on building up our capital area. So you'll notice like we still have so many peasants, still don't have nearly enough construction. We have so many peasants to work through. We'll have to get more construction to make this work. There's something to be said for the strategy of just maxing out taxes. So for example, it could be reasonable to click this and then go like, and then just go ham, like just go bam like this, just max everything out. This could be reasonable to do. Like, you expect the video probably within like a day or 2. It won't take long to make. Like, honestly, like, this wouldn't be too bad of a strat. I tend to not like going super high taxes for beginners, though. Just because you're going to end up with a lot of radicals, and it can be hard to know how to deal with radicals, because they're going to be wanting revolutions, and they're going to be, like, problematic. Whereas, as you can see, with a very low tax strategy, okay? Like, I didn't do much taxation. I only went to 170 construction points. You can get to number one GDP. Well, number one GDP is a bit harder because China's so big, but you can get to number one great power relatively quickly and easily. So that was the Belgium tutorial. I know the back half of this video was a little bit less guided, but the idea is to show something of a demonstration of what Belgium can do while following the principles laid out in the first half of the video. Ultimately, what you've learned here can be applied to just about any country, and I'd highly recommend you go out and play some Victoria 3 to test your knowledge. Do your best to de-peasant your nation so you have better jobs and more easily taxable pops, and secure a couple states that will give you the resources your nation might be missing. If you can do all those things, you'll end up in a very powerful place, and you can bring any nation to the number one great power spot within a relatively short time. If you want to see the full stream of this tutorial, it'll be available in the description. You can also ping me on my Discord if you have any questions or would like help with something. I'm happy to lend a hand. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for your time. You could totally just like opium war and grab like one Chinese state for the dyes and the silk, and then like